Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to give you an update on what I've been reading lately. There's a couple of things that I've been reading just quietly in the background, like Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I'm still not finished with that because I'm taking my time going through that one, and I am enjoying that a whole lot. I have a short story collection that I'm reading through, a couple of gardening books. So I will talk about those later, but these are the books that I have recently finished, so I thought I'd update you on those. The first one is for the Let's Read Nancy Readathon that I'm hosting, and this is book 8, and it's called Nancy's Mysterious Letter. This was written in, 1932. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget to tell you. This book was originally published in 1932, but my copy is the 1968 version. And we have learned, as we have been going through these books, that they have revised these books somewhat from the 1930s. And sometimes the plot is the same, but there's a lot of details that are different in some of these books. So just know that going in, that the plot may be a little different than the 1930s version. But anyway, this is about Nancy receiving, yes, a mysterious letter. She has a friend who is the mail carrier in her neighborhood. He comes over with a letter, and as he is there at the house, at Nancy's house, all of his mail is stolen. The whole bag of mail is stolen from this mail carrier. And the story goes on from there with Nancy finding out that the letter is not for her, but for another Nancy Smith Drew. And so this is a different Nancy. And so there are really two mysteries that are taking place at the same time through the story. It's trying to figure out who this Nancy Smith Drew is and getting her mail to her, as well as who is stealing the mail and why they're taking the mail from this mail carrier. So it was a really good one. I enjoyed this one. In this one, we have Ned, who is a character who shows up in some of Nancy's other books, and she goes to the football game to cheer Ned on, and so there's some fun things with that I enjoyed as well. So I did enjoy this one, and I recommend any of the Nancy Drew, of course, because they're just fun reads. The next one I read was The Glass Blowers by Daphne du Maurier. This was published in 1963, and I also wanted to point out this beautiful picture of Daphne du Maurier. Look at how gorgeous she was. I love it when they include those on the back of these dust jackets. But this was based on her ancestor, Robert, and I forget his last name, but he was a glass blower, and it's about his life as a glass blower in the factory, and they had a pretty successful business during the French Revolution, but it was about what happened to this factory and this family during the French Revolution due to what happened during the French Revolution. Now, I have read another book called Mary Ann by Daphne du Maurier. That was about another relative, and that one, while I enjoyed reading it, it was not my favorite. And unfortunately, this was not my favorite either. So I'm not sure. I know she has some others, I think, based on family members, and I guess she's trying to, make sure she includes, the facts about what really happened. Of course, this is fiction, but it's based on that. And so what she imagines took place, I guess. But it gets to be a little bogged down with the facts to me. In Mary Ann, it was that way. Mary Ann was just, I didn't like that the character Mary Ann. I didn't like her. But in this one, it started out great. I was invested from the beginning. The way that she was telling the story, I thought, okay, this is going to be, the French Revolution's coming. You could just tell the way, the dates and what was happening. So I thought, okay, French Revolution, this is going to be very interesting. And what I normally like about Daphne du Maurier is she has her settings as a character. And I mean, she really is atmospheric, and she sets the tone. You feel like you're there. In most of the books that I have read by Daphne du Maurier, that's one of her strong suits. That's a strength of hers, that you really feel like you're there, and the setting is a character itself. In this one, I was disappointed because you have the French Revolution, and that could be such an atmospheric setting, but I found that it was more encyclopedic. it was more like she was just telling me facts. It's told from the story of Sophie, and Sophie is the sister of Robert, who's the story she's trying to tell. Sophie is writing this kind of like she's writing a memoir, and it's happened a long time ago, and she's remembering. Well, that already distanced us from the story. So it's told in a way that takes away a lot of emotions. It's kind of like almost as if Sophie's trying to distance herself from the emotion of what happened. And it comes across that way. So I couldn't connect with Sophie, the person telling the story. I didn't connect with, well, Robert, I didn't like him as a character. Even though he was an interesting character, I just couldn't connect with anybody in the story. I didn't feel like there were some really hard things that happened in the story, and I felt no emotion. So it was too distant for me. And that made the characters all fall flat in the story. I really thought it had great potential, though, with the French Revolution. The beginning, like I say, I was invested in it up until part 2. It's set in parts. I think there's 3 parts. By part 2, I thought, okay, here we are. We're going to really get into, this build-up of the French Revolution and what's going to happen. And unfortunately, by the time we got there, it was more like, I don't know, like reading a newspaper article about it. So anyway, I'm glad I read it because I want to read all of the books by Daphne du Maurier, but this was not my favorite. The next one I read was for my Newbery project. It's called Call It Courage by Armstrong Sperry. Again, a beautiful book. This was published in 1940, and it won the Newbery in 1941. This is about this little boy here in the canoe with his pet dog. They set off on an adventure. At the beginning of the story, you find out that Maftu's mother has died due to the ocean and the sea. He's afraid of the sea because of this tragic event, and the villagers think he's a coward, and so they make fun of him, they ostracize him, and so one day he decides he's not going to be a coward any longer. He's going to find courage, and so he takes his little canoe with his pet dog, and he also has an albatross as a pet, and they are his companions on this adventure, and he sets out in the sea, but their storm comes up, and he ends up on a deserted island and has to survive. It was really a great story. It's a simple little story. It's told like a little folk tale. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I felt like it was one of those books that a little boy would love for a summer adventure. This would be a great summer read for a young boy of 8 or 9 years old. I think they would enjoy this book. It did have, as I started it and as I was reading, as he set off in his little canoe, I did think of The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I did think of that. However, that one to me is a tragic story, and it's, I don't know, just makes me feel really sad and tragic. This is an uplifting, encouraging story. So if you get that feeling as you're going along, keep reading, because it ends up full of hope and encouragement. And I really enjoyed this one. And then I had to read another Agatha Christie, because why not? I read Toward Zero. This is a superintendent battle mystery. And I think there's, 4 or 5 of these. But what was interesting about this was, even though Hercule Poirot does not show up in this book, he is mentioned in this book, and I enjoyed that little nod to Hercule Poirot in the story. But this is about a celebrity tennis player. You see that on the front, he's playing tennis. It's about a celebrity tennis player who always, every year, he goes on holiday to this seaside home of, I think she's a relative. She's either a relative or a godmother or something. I can't remember. But anyway, he goes to her home every year, and he would always go with his wife. Well, now he is divorced and remarried. And he decides this particular year that he wants to make amends with his ex-wife. He feels bad the way that he treated her, and he wants to make amends. And so he tells the lady that owns the home, I'm going to invite her to come along too. So they get to this vacation home by the sea, and it's the tennis player and his wife and his ex-wife are going to be there. So all the people here are, you know, it's already tense because all of these people are thinking, what are you thinking bringing your ex-wife and your new wife together? This is not a vacation. So anyway, it was awkward because of that, and I did like that because it did feel tense as they were, you know, interacting with one another. And of course there's murder. What I loved though best about this was the beginning, because there's a prologue at the beginning that is the end of the story, and then we work our way backward. And I just found that to be so much fun, because it was, Agatha Christie was showing, like, you know, to get to solve this murder mystery, you have to go back to the beginning and work towards zero. And why did this happen? Is, you know, what caused this to happen? What are the clues we see all along as we're going? And I just loved that approach to this one. It was different for me. So I do recommend this one. This one was published in 1944. And this was one that she really did a great job, and I enjoyed it. And then finally I read A Fair Barbarian by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This was published in 1880. And I loved it. I thought this was such a cute little book. It is a romance. It's a sweet little romance though. And it just, the characters were fantastic in this one. This is about a young girl who is from Nevada, and she travels to England to stay in a little small country town with her aunt, while her dad is trying to save their business. So she is so different from the people in this little town. And there is a lady here who controls everybody in the town. It's like, mainly, I think of Cranford, like mainly a bunch of women doing everything. If you've ever read Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell, it kind of had that feel at the beginning of it. But anyway, this young girl moves in, and she's an American, and she does everything different, and she dresses different. She definitely talks different. She doesn't know the rules, and she's not able to follow them. She has the sweetest little aunt though. I love her relative. She's just precious. And I even enjoyed the bossy lady. I can't remember what her name is. The bossy, Theobald, I think that was her name. She was great too, even though she's supposedly the villain and telling everyone what to do in this story. I enjoyed her too. But the young girl from Nevada befriends another girl her age, and it's fun because the two girls are totally opposite, and also they learn from each other. It's just a sweet little friendship that I really enjoyed. And again, there is a little romance that I enjoyed too. The only thing I didn't enjoy was like the very last few pages. Something happens at the very end of this story that I was really annoyed by. One of the characters, I won't say too much, but one of the characters does something that I just did not agree with. And so that did dampen it for me, but still I loved the story. I enjoyed it. I will be rereading it because it's just a fun little small English town kind of story from the 1800s. It's a sweet little story, and I highly recommend A Fair Barbarian. So those are the books that I read over the past week or so. I'm still reading through Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I have a short story collection I'm reading right now, a couple of gardening books that I'm going to talk to you about soon that I'm really excited about. What are you reading? Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.